This is Geek Gab with your host, John, and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back, Geek Gab, for Saturday, August 18th, 2018. We have got a special guest today, author H.M. Clay, here to discuss his book. But before we get to that, so, Dornell, how was your week?
Hey, man. It's been a good week. Mostly life stuff. New boss at my day job. Just to let you guys know, being the co-host of the Geek Gab is not a full-time paying position. I still have a day job. And I hear the critics. Yeah, I know, John. Keep it. It's all right. I'm not going full-time podcaster yet. Just yet.
Do you want to? I mean, is it okay to talk about a little bit about your boss?
Yeah, why not?
Because I think it's hilarious, and I'm not being mean. I'm not making fun of him. This is not an attack on him. I love the thought of this man being my boss. If I had a boss, I think I would want it to be your boss.
So, it's funny. I interviewed him to be my boss in a very fun sequence of events. But he's this big Bulgarian guy, and he's got the thick accent. He's actually he's not tall. He's a little shorter than I am, but he's sort of big, thick, meaty, and he's got the shaved head and the gold chain, and he speaks with thick Bulgarian accent. He's a great guy. I think he's going to be a good manager, but I swear, if you put him in a tracksuit, you would think he was part of the mafia. This guy's awesome. You just have to hear the accent.
We were talking about this before the show. That's how I knew his description of his boss. The Bulgarian accent is like the absolutely purest archetypal Cold War accent, even more than a Russian accent. It's just great. So colorful. Interesting to listen to.
It's truly a thing of beauty. I mean, sometimes it makes discussing technical problems a little more complicated than it needs to be, but it's delightful.
So we've got the Bulgarian boss, and you're looking through. Is it Holmes or Moldvay you were looking through?
Moldvay. I got the basic set PDFs from a very reputable source, I assure you, and I haven't made any explicit plans yet, but that's where I'm leaning towards as far as gaming goes. Plus the usual Gloomhaven nonsense every week.
I'm trying to think if there was something else. I am so short of sleep today that my memory is just shot to pieces. So if during the conversation I have sudden memory lapses, you'll know it is not because I'm not paying attention, but because my memory is just not what it should be at this point because of sleep deprivation. So I'm trying to think of, I've done the usual stuff this week. If I'm going to give a report about my week, I have done the usual stuff this week. I read a lot of research material. I took dozens of notes, maybe over 100 notes on various aspects of the secret project. And I did my daily blog post, and I went and saw a movie yesterday, even though we don't have to talk about it on the show, which is just fine because the movie I saw yesterday and last week and maybe the week before that, I've been fortunate that when it's time to discuss movies on the show this week and last week, that I haven't had to discuss the movies I saw because they were really boring and not at all really good. There wasn't any meat to them to discuss. I was kind of panicking. I will not lie. I was kind of panicking before the show because we were having some technical problems, surprisingly enough, and we couldn't get our guest, who will be on in mere moments. We couldn't get our guest attached to the chat to have him on the show. And so I'm looking kind of out of the side of my eye over at my backpack, wherein is my notebook with notes on the last few movies I've seen. Because even if I wasn't going to do them for the show, I'd take notes anyway, just to have them in case we need them. And I'm thinking I'm going to have some kind of emergency fill-in topic. I'm imagining having to change the subject of the show on YouTube and, having to do a whole show without a guest. And so that means I'm going to have to talk about these movies. And I'm just thinking, man, I really hope that doesn't happen. So we're fortunate that I was not forced to, because I have like 3 lines, literally like 3 lines of notes for yesterday's movie. It was that unmemorable, and it was a waste. It was a waste. And I'll tell you why it was a waste. They hired the 2 guys from The Raid.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah. The main bad dude and the cop. The 2 guys from The Raid are in this movie, and the movie is terrible. Complete waste of their talents.
Ugh.
The cop has actually a cool action scene, just the one. And it's like this cool martial arts scene. He starts off chained to a hospital bed, and during the course of the fight, he slowly disassembles this thing that he's chained to while being attacked by a couple of assassins. And that's good. The rest of the movie sucked. I thought, man, this is their big U.S. debut, and this is the kind of crap you throw at me? So really, if we had to do a movie review, it'd be 2 hours of me complaining that this movie just wasn't as good as The Raid. But we don't. Fortunately, we don't, because we have our special guest here. We might as well let him say hi. Mr. Clay, how are you?
Hi-ho. H.M. Clay here.
Now, do you want to use your author name or your real name on the show?
Just call me Clay. H.M. Clay. It's because it's easier for our listeners to remember and to find me. hmclay.com is my website. So
now, I have, by calling you an author, implied that you have written a book. Is this, in fact, the case?
Yes, I have. That's what it takes to be an author, to write a book. And I did it.
I'm impressed.
Right, because everyone's always saying, like, that's what, because I work at a library, and all my coworkers is like, I've long wanted to write a book, but I never got around to it. Well, guess what? I did it. So,
and it's available on Amazon.
Yes, it is.
And a link to the Amazon book is in the description of the video below. So, your book is called Garden of Chaos. And I'm making a bet with myself about where that title came from. And so I want to see how much money I owe myself.
Okay, let me give you a hint. Sega Genesis? Were you thinking about that?
Like Chaos Emeralds?
No.
Because I thought it was Garden of Chows at first.
Right. Actually, it looks like Chad's, which that kind of adds like a hierarchical social.
Was that a deliberate choice? Was that a deliberate choice for the font? Do you can you make the O look like a D? Is that what you?
It's some jerk on 4chan. Believe it or not, there was a jerk on 4chan who saw my book art and said, "Garden of Chads." I might like this. Nothing about beta or gamma males, and actually, no, my protagonist is a beta or gamma or something delta, somewhere along the line of that. But anyway, get off the topic. Actually, I originally wanted to call it Garden of Rage after Streets of Rage because I thought it would be really cool to have lots of brawling, as you know, like beat 'em up themes. But then it kind of took on a more of a political commentary in it. So it went in a different direction than I originally anticipated it to go to. So, I mean, there are fight scenes. and there's lots of dialogue and lots of humor involved. So it's not all deeper messages, but I think in order to propel me to the keyboard, it took a deeper message that I wanted to get out and for people to hear.
Now that's really interesting. You say that you have a deeper message, but what really set a flag up in my mind is that was this really inspired by Streets of Rage? Because that's awesome.
Yeah, I wanted it to be. And actually, I was thinking about green belts of rage at first, because like green spaces, they call it, parks. Maybe in the future, if no one's using cars and everyone wants to control their greenways and their parks with mob violence and thuggery. And so that was kind of what I thought of at first, but no, that's not what it turned out to be. It turned out taking place on a college campus, which I think of as kind of maybe a walled off garden of utopia. It's like an idealistic setting where kind of the height of civilization and knowledge, but what happens if that collapses from within, and that's where the chaos begins.
Huh.
And yeah, Jordan Peterson too. That's where the chaos came from.
I win.
There you go. Ultimately, that's where it came from. Yes.
I win my bet.
Well, that's because you read my press release, right?
Yes, I did, actually.
Okay. So you cheated.
Well, you didn't say in your press release that the name came directly from Jordan Peterson. At least I don't remember. But again, as I may have mentioned, my memory is failing. And I'd remember whether or not I'd mentioned that if my memory wasn't failing. See how quickly that came back? Man, that was like 5-6 minutes before that paid off.
Man, this is why people tune in.
Now, let's take a step back for a second. What is it about your book that audiences will find, that your audience, because there are lots of people who like lots of different things, and the big goal, the big job, the big problem for authors is to write a book that's the best book they can make right now and to move on to the next one. But the second big problem with authors is to find the audience that will enjoy your stuff. Either a pre-made audience out there that's already ready to read zombie novels or whatever, or assemble an audience who will like your book by brute force. So if you are speaking to those people, to the people that would most enjoy your book, as far as you know right now, what is it about your book that they would find most enjoyable?
Okay, this is not a pulp book, and I know you a lot of times talk about the pulp revolution, although it does have certain elements of that. It does have lots of action and humor and fun and good versus evil, all that stuff. But it has a political bent, and I think of it as a kind of a red-pilled, more conservative, idealistically. That's kind of the frame behind that I wrote this. And is there enough? Do you think there's enough like libertarian fiction out there, or do you think maybe we could use a little bit more? You think? I mean, I know that like the Prometheus Wars, which I found out by listening to you guys. I mean, I know that there is some, but I think that there needs to be more of a scene, and I'm very happy and proud to be part of that underground scene.
Oh, they've got their own little awards, don't they, for libertarian fiction?
Right. The Prometheus Wars. Yes, there's some, but like a lot of the books that, and I don't want to single anyone out, but a lot of the books are seem kind of like, I don't know how really purely libertarian they are, So, I mean,
you said that you're influenced by Jordan Peterson. How does that?
Yes.
So, what? Well, why don't you give me a little bit of an idea of where that influence is and sort of what the gist of the story is?
Well, I mean, so I was listening to his lectures on the Bible and Genesis, the Garden of Eden. See, Garden of Chaos, get it. But it's just like, I just thought of like, what if the college campus with, with all this Antifa and all this, the censoring of speech, this, the humanities, how they're excluding more conservative voices. And what if, we think of like the postmodern campus is force feeding people instead of like back in the Garden of Eden days, the Eve and Adam ate the fruit of knowledge, what if now we're being force fed the fruit of ignorance? And that's where the idea came from. And so some of his quotes about how college is an extended adolescence with no quality control, about how safe spaces are detrimental, perhaps in the short term. I'm sorry, I mean, they're beneficial in the short term, but in the long term, they can be detrimental. So there is a lot of anti-SJW rhetoric. I'm sorry, there's a lot of pro-SJW rhetoric in my book, but it's a way to kind of criticize, and it's a satire of much of the movement.
Sure.
Right. And I know talking about politics is against the rules, so maybe I.
Well, I mean, okay. Let me expand on the Geek Gab no politics rule. It simply means that we're not going to have a show where we talk about current events, policy, and things like that. We're not going to have a pro-Trump show. We're not going to have a show about how can the Democrats take the House of Representatives this year. No. But talking about your book is perfectly on topic. And I thought that was really interesting. Let me make sure I understand what you're saying, because I want to restate the idea of the Garden of Chaos is the modern university is where people learn, I guess, the opposite of knowledge. They learn lies and falsehoods instead of truth and wisdom.
Right, that's correct. It's the whole postmodernist. There is no, trying to throw out the old traditional cultural notions of morality, that kind of thing. But a lot of the voices that I have in the book comes from, there are like little press clippings that are written by the university press in the book, and they are very it's almost like just listening to just CNN or just clips on the internet. It's just really easy to write this kind of SJW politically correct speech. And just the way that my protagonist, Gage Alabaster is his name, he becomes somewhat of a I don't want to use the word victim, but he becomes somewhat of as a tool that they use, because I think every cultural movement needs its heroes and its villains, and he's turned into a villain unwillingly and unfairly so, I think. So that's much of the struggle in the book.
So what genre would you put it in specifically, besides like libertarian fiction?
It's dystopian, I would say, just because it's kind of, and it's like it takes place in an alternate universe, at a university Madian state, which doesn't really exist, and a town that doesn't exist, in a city, in a country, in a world that doesn't exist. But that way I can throw in any aspect I want. And so a lot of ways in this alternate universe, I kept the aesthetics that I really enjoy. I enjoy brutalistic architecture, which is college campuses. A lot of times that goes hand in hand. I enjoy the 1980s music and the video games, classic gaming. I don't like cell phones. I don't really care much for social media, which I know a lot of ways as an author these days, especially a self-published one, you have to be savvy in it. And so I do what I have to do. But so I took that aspect of it out. So but as far as a dystopian, and I think, a lot of it's I think some of the greatest works of dystopian fiction are kind of like slippery slopes. And I know that's a logical fallacy, but it's just the idea of what happens if the current trends of today keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And in this alternate universe that I've created, things have gotten pretty bad.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. Now, I guess I get the philosophy and the themes that you want to express, but
the plot,
yeah, I'm gonna
characters.
I'm gonna be harsh here.
No, like, it's cool.
Is this gonna be one of the big criticisms of the famous works of Ayn Rand is that she's a better philosopher than a writer. It's dry, sort of dull, and that sort of thing. So do you have an interesting story to go along with this very interesting setting in philosophy?
I'm glad you asked, actually. The one feedback that I get the most from my readers, my early readers, is that they really like the characters. And that's actually how, when I started, back when I was thinking of the Streets of Rage type, I created these characters that I thought were very interesting, people I like to hang out with, people sometimes modeled after certain characters. Oh, for example, one of them, his name is Shade. That's his code name. He's modeled after the G.I. Joe character Snake Eyes. I have a clown, a lawyer who's a clown. And he's like a trickster that kind of it's a good way for me to parody the judicial system, I guess, is to have a clown attorney. I have a strong man who's somewhat like a benevolent American male from the 19th century, who's he's somewhat of a Conan type, but he finds himself on the university campus, and therefore it's the fish out of water vibe I have, going on with him. And just, yeah. So, and I think when I wrote this book, I knew where I wanted to begin and I knew where I wanted to end, but for everything that happened in between, I let the characters take over. So, and I think that that's a lot of the issues we have in today's fiction is that you don't really have unique, compelling characters that you care about. It's just stuff happening. And it's kind of like, I think that was one of the main point behind the Red Letter Media's critique of the Star Wars prequels, is that stuff is going on, things are blowing up, you see all the special effects, and I do have action in my book, but it's kind of like you need to have characters that you care about in order to make the action meaningful. It's kind of like, I don't watch sporting events from other countries because I don't know the players, I don't know the teams, I have no emotional connection with them. But my home team, heck, I have a emotional connection with that team, so I'm going to follow them all the way. And the incredible things they do on the field, I can find that inspiring, or I can enjoy that. So if that's the analogy I can draw. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And as for the plot, it's just about Gage. He, a lot of ways I see him as who I was back when I went to college 20 years ago, is that I was somebody who went to college because I was supposed to, and I was told that I had to go. I didn't know what I wanted to major in. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I had nothing. I mean, I was attracted to girls. That was about it. That was my only interest, really. And that I needed to find something to grasp onto, some meaning to push me forward. And I think that's a lot of what Jordan Peterson as well, what the messages behind his book and why he's caught on, is because I think a lot of, especially young males, but girls too, who find themselves in college because they feel like they have to go. Maybe they're majoring in humanities, but they don't know where it's going to lead to, and they don't know what they want to do with their life. And so there's a coming of age aspect as well.
Okay.
So when we were talking in the email before, while we were setting up the show over the last week and a bit, I got the impression that you had listened to at least part of last week's episode. And because you were talking about contrasting what the advice we had talked about with Mr. Walker, which is that so many people put in whiny, ineffectual, useless protagonists, and we're getting kind of tired of it. But you wanted to present an alternative to that, to show why that can actually work for a book. And now's your chance. Go.
Okay. Well, I think one example he brought up was like the beta or gamma or whatever the term is in anime characters. I'm thinking like Tenchi Muyo, who are just, these whiny guys. And like in a lot of ways, I identify with that because that's why I saw myself when I was younger. And I was kind of a whiny, effeminate man who had really no power of my own. I wasn't born with superpowers or anything like that. I had to acquire them. And a lot of ways, I think that's like what the coming of age tale is that Gage, he has nothing going for him. In fact, he has a lot of things going against him, but he makes one crucial decision about halfway through the book. And that is where he gets his power from. That is where he makes his change. And that's where he takes his stand. That is how he gets his meaning, is he finds out that he is forced into a situation and he can either go along with the system or he can say no and rebel. And so that, at least he has his will, and he has a will because he's been used by the institution for a purpose, and he himself can choose to go against that. And I think that's a very inspirational story. And so I think a lot of ways it's not about how the characters begin. It's I mean, sorry, I think it's like, it's not really necessarily that the characters begin with this great strength and power, but we like to see them develop the great strength and power as they go along the way. That's why, 80s movies have training montages, and we enjoy watching those. So I hope that answers your question there.
I don't know that I actually got around to asking a question. But...
Okay. All right. But yeah, so I just, I read the summaries of what the pulp revolution is, and there is a place for that. I absolutely agree. In fact, I want to escape from what's in the current culture, the culture war. It can beat you down, and it's just in a way, there's a humor of reading like people's absurd responses on social media, the stupid things that people say, and think, you can laugh at, like, oh my God, I can't, what are people thinking these days? People are going crazy. People are losing their mind. But in a lot of ways, you want to escape that, and you want to go back to the old traditional stories. And there is absolutely a place for that. But there's also, I think, a place for my book, and that, every movement needs to have its bomb throwers, I guess, not literally, but I'm saying that every movement needs to have a counter voice. And I like to think that, hopefully there's can we call it Peter's punk? Jordan Peter punk, instead of steampunk or cyberpunk, Peter's punk movement of sci-fi literature that can kind of fight back against a lot of the politically correct SJW literature that we see dominating these days.
Well, here's a theme that has come up again and again on the show when we talked about the stupid puppies. I mean, sad puppies, and the pulp revolution and everything like that. Having a message is good. Having a pure message, an intelligent message, is good. But the problem with boring message fic isn't the message; it's the boring.
And actually, I disagree with that. I mean, that's nice. It's a great slogan, and there's a lot of people who really, that's the way they feel. For me, the problem with message fic isn't just the boring. It is also the message. I hate, even if it's an interesting book, I hate feeling like I'm being lectured to, even when I agree with the position being espoused. And so for me, the problem really is message. If you've got a message in a book, it really aggravates me. I don't really like it in books. So I don't know. That's it. That's all I had to say on that. I don't need to argue about it anymore, but yeah.
Well, my point in this context is that as long as you've got a good story going, your message is going to get across.
I think so. And if you yourself hold certain beliefs and views, and a lot of that's going to get across as well. I think, though, let's face it. I mean, millions of people have read Atlas Shrugged and thought this is very profound, and probably millions and millions more have read it and thought this is very boring. I mean, I think the heavy-handed message fiction is not for everybody, but there is a market out there for it. And I think there maybe even is a purpose for it. And a lot of my messages, the speeches, there are monologues but actually I put the monologues in the mouths of the villains, the antagonists. So at least I guess we can, in a way, maybe it is like the James Bond villain thing where they always talk about their grand scheme right before they send him off to his, they tie him up and put him in a tank of laser sharks or whatever. Yeah, maybe it is kind of like that. But I still think I find that interesting. I think sometimes it is profound and interesting to know what the whole scheme is behind everything.
I think it's a sign of how degenerate Western culture has gotten that we don't actually have laser sharks yet.
Oh, we could use something like that. I mean, it's some proper villains. I mean, the villains these days range from, self-immolating terrorists to, nefarious media organizations pushing a narrative. I mean, we need some proper villains. Where's our laser beams and our volcano layers and everything?
Or those guys, dude. I tweeted out that pic that somebody posted and got passed around of like those 7 guys who are all doing the, feminism power fist gesture.
Oh gosh, I saw that today.
I was just like, my comment was, if I had a good sneeze, like I was really had gotten a face full of pollen and I just sneezed, I could blow all those guys away. They'd go tumbling off into the forest they're posing in front of. It just, but the point is, like, yeah, those are the villains. Those are the ones either like dressing up in Antifa costumes or spreading around the lies that get people to dress up into Antifa costumes. And it's pathetic.
My antagonist, I don't want to give away too much, but I think of him as somewhat a sympathetic villain. And I know that, again, this probably goes against the pulp ethos. That's the word. I was about to say aesthetic, but that doesn't make sense. Okay. Yeah, the pulp ethos is that, your villains to be all megalomaniacal, psychopathic villains. Mine has good intentions, but I think that's another message behind my book. And I think that's a message probably behind society, is that a lot of society is that good intentions ultimately don't matter. That it's really because the road to hell is paved with good intentions, that's a common saying too. So I think that makes him, I think that gives something for readers to think about, is that, you can judge somebody as a good person and yet not like the things that they're doing, the things that they're saying, or the scenarios that they're perpetrating, or whatever. So I guess you know what I mean.
I think I do.
Yeah. Okay. And sorry, right. no laser sharks. No laser sharks.
Yeah, but
in my book, I have lots of ninjas, and I
was going to say, because the laser sharks, I think you missed an opportunity here, because you said that you love the 80s stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I think you missed out on some. All right. So speaking of current culture, weird cultural trends, I'm going to go way off the reservation here. What do you make of the whole newfound love of synthwave and vaporwave and all these new sort of YouTube centric types of music?
Oh yeah, and I think there's even Jordan Peterson wave too, JBP wave. I saw, so if Simpsons wave wasn't enough,
I listened to a little bit of the new retro wave YouTube channel.
Yeah,
I picked up a couple of albums and some singles from it, so I actually bought based on it.
Yeah, and actually, I have a podcast myself, and it has nothing to do with. Very little to do with politics or literature. It's all about 80s pop music, and that's 80ofthe80s.com if anyone wants to check it out. But no, I do follow that, and I like a lot of it. A lot of it, though, I think is a bit kind of ambient and background music, and I like stuff that has more of a melody. Maybe stuff that's more chiptune-y, I guess, sounds like old NES soundtracks as far as instrumentals. But I'm also surprised as how few of it actually has lyrics and words to it. I don't know if there's a lack of decent singers who want to contribute to this subgenre. But I would like to hear more like melodic songs with words, and I would also like more analog synths, because a lot of it is emulating like the digital synth that maybe formed the horror soundtracks in the later half of the decade. But I really like the analog sound that the Kraftwerk and Yellow Magic Orchestra and early Depeche Mode, Soft Cell, and all groups like that.
I will say this about the new retro wave stuff, and that's a channel. That's not a genre. It's just a channel that is very.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think synthwave is the name of the official name, if whoever coined it.
But I have noticed this is. I think this may be a big criticism, but it may be a bigger criticism. I think people will take it as a bigger criticism than it actually is. A lot of their stuff, a lot of the songs that they showcase on the channel, because the channel doesn't make music. It selects music or gets music sent to them that they then publicize, that they play or put online on YouTube for you to play. I think a lot of it is sometimes indistinguishable and samey.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I do wish there was more variety. I wish there was more. On the New Retro Wave channel, there was one that was dedicated to like funk, like more of a electro funk music, and I really wish that was a kind of a subgenre that happened in the early '80s that kind of went away because it later became house music. I would really like to hear more of that. I would like to hear more maybe industrial, but like melodic industrial music, and that is a subgenre that I don't know why I never took off, because people like a lot of the heavy metal fans and a lot of the synthwave fans overlap, and you would think there would be more synthwave tunes that would sound more like heavy metal, like entirely with synthesizers and not so much of just lots of ambient noise.
Yeah, a lot of that funk from the early '80s. There was some developing new funk, I guess, that funk got wiped out when rap kind of hit big.
Sad. Yeah, sad. Look, nothing against rap. I love old school rap, but there was like, again, less melodies, more, it was more lyrical, and there was less of emphasis on instruments and performing instruments. And so that's why I think that there's like a whole generation of funk that could have turned into maybe a musical hip hop, and not like the hip hop that kind of dominated the 90s and 2000s and so on and so forth. So that's just my opinion, though. That's just what I like.
One of our audience members that's in the chat right now is a record producer, or he had a band and was selling records at one time. And so he has, I have no doubt, but that, and he also makes Cursola, the Cursola magazine. So I have no doubt, but that he has opinions about the musical stuff we've expressed. And I should say this, just to get it out there, I love a wide variety of music, but I tend to pick one or two bands in each genre rather than diving into a genre wholesale. And I am not by any means a musical historian. I'm not schooled in producing music. I don't know what technical details are and stuff, and I'm just as happy to not learn at this point in my life. But I do love a lot of music, and I listen to a wide variety of music across a wide range of time. But so it's the opinion of a big fan of music who isn't educated in the industry or in specific history. Like, I know about the Velvet Underground. I've never listened to their album. I've heard the saying that, only 10,000 people bought the first Velvet Underground album, but all of them went out and formed a band. I could not tell you which bands came from that particular music background, who were inspired by the Velvet Underground to go start their own garage bands, and which ones became successful and which ones were unfairly overlooked. No idea, but I do know something, a little bit, a tiny little bit, and I'm smart enough to know what I don't know.
I had hopes for the internet. Did you have great did you hope things would turn out better? But I had hopes about the way that art would help the independent artist, not only in literature, but in music and also movies. It is easier to make and distribute with technology, easier and cheaper to make and distribute your material. Yet there are no, like, the major corporations don't want to put forth their effort and money to market it. And instead of like making a $50,000 emoji movie, why couldn't they not give 50 directors $1 million, like each, and then see what comes out of it? And it's just like, yeah, the stuff is out there, but you really have to dig really deep, and you have to wade through so much crap. And I just miss, I miss the days when the mediums didn't seem so disposable. And so, go ahead.
people thought that the internet was going to be like Usenet. And I have to explain that to people because a lot of you listening to the show might not know what Usenet was. It was a communications protocol before the World Wide Web was invented. And you had a number of what they call news groups, which were discussion groups around a specific topic. So you would have like alt.roleplayinggames.dnd. And that would be for people posting about D&D. And then you could, extrapolate from there to everything under the sun. The virtues of Usenet were that it was a distributed system so that no one site controlled or could censor Usenet. It was all across the internet. Every ISP offered at least a subset of those news groups. And so it was anarchic and it was impossible to censor. And we thought, or people thought, that that was going to be the future of the internet. In point of fact, the internet has gone exactly the opposite direction. The internet is even more limited than the real world because of network effects, which is to say the notion that the value of a site is the number of people using it squared. So if you just have one person posting on a site, it has a value of 1 to receive and communicate information. If you have 2 people, it has a value of 4. If you have 10 people, it has a value of 100. If you have 100 people, and so on and so forth. You see where I'm going. So Facebook has 2 billion people on it. At one point it had. And all of that information exchange, no matter what you're using it for, is going through one central authority. And not getting into any of the legalities of things, not getting into any proposing solutions or whatever. My point is that we thought the future of the internet was distributed communication that would route around censorship, that would interpret censorship as damage and route around it. When in fact what has happened is that the internet has become even more centralized, even more controlled by one organization. I mean, even in the world, if you don't like a country, it's at least conceivable that you can emigrate to another country. But if you don't like Facebook, there is no replacement to Facebook. There are alternatives, none of whom have the same size of network, none of whom have the same network effects. And so the internet has become subject to a very small number of authorities who have a very outsized influence over what gets said or what gets spread. Now, a lot of people who I know are very excited about indie book publishing because anybody can throw up books on Amazon, which is great. But the worry, which I have expressed several times on the show, is that at some point, Amazon can instantly, in a day, less than a day, turn around and begin exerting influence over the content exactly the way Facebook and Twitter are. And so we thought that the internet was going to be wild and free forever. But network effects and the influence of a huge population of people who are steered to where everybody else is means that the internet has become more censorious, more controlling. It is like the world, instead of having 150, 180 countries, all of a sudden was subject to 10 countries. And they got to say what everything was. And yes, you can go out and establish your own site, but until you get 2 billion people on your site, you're not going to have the same network effects. You simply are not going to be able to provide the same value as Facebook will. And so it's really, really difficult, if not impossible, to compete. I'm not proposing any solutions. I'm not endorsing any solutions. I just You were talking about how we thought the internet was going to go one way and it went someplace else. And I think that the internet has gone in a really dark direction, and to a certain extent, and it could go much, much worse, and people need to be aware of that and prepare for that.
It's just like I said in a conversation about the current censorship problems, the whole Alex Jones controversy. I said, well, this isn't the cyberpunk dystopia we were promised, but sure is the one we deserve.
So,
right. Yeah, and I think one, it killed off the grassroots. And the grassroots were created because of regional limitations. If I could use a music analogy, you used to have local bands that you would go see. You used to have local record stores, local labels, scenes. The problem is that it was because you could only consume what you were close to. You didn't have, you could, but now everybody in the world is going to the very same place, and it kills off all these laboratories that were of local, were places where people could locally experiment, where artists could experiment. I mean, heck, you go back to the old medieval days, you would have little collectives of minstrels or whatever. And, every village had to have their own minstrels. And now there's only one minstrel for millions of people, I guess, if I could use that analogy there. And it's sad because we're losing. I guess a lot of that it kills off the uniqueness, and the uniqueness is there. You just really have to dig deep for it. And who has the time for that? Who has the time to find go to some obscure webpage that only one person's clicked on?
Is this at all reflected in your book?
I think we just gave Clay an idea for his next book.
No, maybe so. And actually, my next book is definitely going to be less political, because I think a lot of this has worn me out, and I do feel the need to escape from a lot of it. But again, it's kind of in a formulative stage, and I do want to do a sequel. My readers have been looking forward to a sequel. So, but hopefully, yeah, it will be less. But as far as the, I can't really think of an analogy about how the way, because again, it takes some place in alternate universe before the internet. Now, granted, the internet is introduced in my book, and there's kind of a primitive version of the internet that is used in a way. It's a culture, it's a commentary on the internet, because the internet is used to distribute this fruit of ignorance, I could say. So in a way, it does have that aspect of it, but it's not like the internet we know today. This is more of like the old monochrome bulletin board systems that existed back in the 80s. So. And also, I just want to say, I don't want to bite the hand that feeds. I mean, what are we talking on right now?
Yeah, there's some good stuff. We're using the popular, mass available Google TM Hangouts on YouTube.
Well, unfortunately, we did get to a little bit of a late start, but we are running up against our time limit here. So is there another topic we want to explore, or should I call for final opinions?
I am open to anything, except for, like I said, I don't really do tabletop RPGs. I do tabletop games, so anything but that I'm open to. So
I was legitimately,
I mean, I'll listen to it. I don't have to contribute. So
I was legitimately no fooling. Somebody just dropped a comment in the chat about wanting to know where their data jack in Cyberdeck was. So I was legitimately going to ask you what you thought of the new Shadowrun stuff as a joke. But yeah, that was actually going to be the next question I had. But you're not into tabletop. We already know that. Okay, off the table. Do you have any last sales pitch? Give our audience your best sales pitch for your book before we go.
The Guard of Chaos, it's a very unique book, and it's hard to fit into a lot of different genres, and it's definitely not for everybody. But I don't believe in a one-size-fits-all literature. It's a coming of age story about a boy at a college campus who goes through a lot of series of trials. Meets lots of interesting, colorful characters, has adventures. Just in the first chapter alone, he's attacked by a gang of ninjas, and so that that right there will show you that. And one thing a lot of the feedback I've said is people really appreciate the dialogue, because I don't really mess around with detail. The details that I do give are mostly due to symbolism that kind of points towards a bigger picture, but it's lots of dialogue and interesting characters and humor. And so I think it's only 99 cents on Amazon for Kindle. The print version is $9. I kept it as least expensive as possible for the moment, because I am very confident that the book is going to do well through word of mouth. And I do think that there is an audience for, let's say, red-pilled sci-fi dystopian literature. There is some of it out there, but not enough. And I'm hopefully this can maybe start a scene. Oh, I'm getting are you buzzing me right there? Is my time up?
No. That's the phone. That's my phone alarm that goes off at 1:01 on every day. That's why I usually turn my phone off. Apparently I did not do that.
Also, yeah, it was your buzzer. Sorry.
Thanks for that. Do you have any final words before we go?
Actually, it was fun to chat. I'd love to talk more about music. I'm gonna go listen to some synthwave and stuff right now. Interested in your book. I'm rambling now. I'm good. It's been a fun show. Thanks for coming on.
And then if I could also add, as for the music aspect, again, it's 80oftheeighties.com. That's the podcast that I do with my wife. And we've received recently a total of 150,000 downloads. So there definitely is an audience that wants to hear about great 80s synth pop music. So not just synth pop, but post-punk, new wave, the hits and the bands that made the hits, but also some of the forgotten hidden gems out there that you should probably know about.
Awesome.
Thanks for letting me do that sales pitch there.
Just to let people know, there is already a link to 80 of the 80s in the description of the video. Right now, you can... And I'm not talking to you people in the future who are listening to this later on, podcasts or on YouTube. It's actually, for those of you live in the audience right now, there's a link to 80 of the 80s. There's also a link to Garden of Chaos, where you can buy that on Amazon. So thanks for coming on the show, Clay.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. And thanks for teaching me about Google Hangouts.
Good luck. It's... I don't want to talk about Google Hangouts right now, but good luck.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in live. Thanks to everybody who's listening to the show later. Go ahead and click, like and subscribe, and be sure to click on the bell icon to double secret subscribe to actually get announcements about when the show is going live, so you can come in and participate in the chat with our unusually intelligent and highly motivated audience. We are available on youtube.com/geekgab, or you can get us on the iTunes Music Store, on soundcloud.com, or on the Google Play Store. Just do a search for Geek Gab. That's a show for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We are leaving you for now, but don't you worry. Don't you fret. We will be back.